On Christmas Eve, my son told me there was no place for me at his dinner table and said I should just go home and spend Christmas alone. I swallowed my tears and silently thanked God that I hadn't yet given him the check for $100,000. I'd saved all these years to gift him. The check was still in my purse, right beside the last bit of dignity I had left. But that night, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I left only a letter at his door, and when he read it, he screamed in despair. The morning of December 24th began like any other. I got up at 6 a.m. as I always had since retiring after 40 years of teaching. The sun hadn't risen yet, but I was already in the kitchen preparing the traditional Christmas pudding my son, Ethan, always loved. This year was supposed to be special. After a lifetime of saving, after selling the house where I'd raised my son alone following my husband's early death, I had finally managed to gather an amount that could change his life: $100,000. As I whisked the eggs, I pictured Ethan's joyful face when he opened the envelope holding that check. Ethan was 45 now, still dreaming of opening his own restaurant but never having enough capital. His wife, Vanessa, whom I had met only 3 years earlier when they got married, had always kept her distance, though I didn't mind. I figured having a mother-in-law at 38 wasn't easy. I finished the pudding, then chose my navy blue dress and my mother's pearl necklace to wear that evening. The taxi I'd ordered arrived right on time, taking me from my small apartment to the upscale neighborhood where Ethan lived, about 40 minutes away. During the ride, my heart beat uncontrollably fast. In my purse, besides the envelope with the check, were a few small gifts for Vanessa and her parents. I had never met them, only seen them in photos. Ethan always said they were influential people. Her father, a real estate developer. Her mother, a well-known attorney. When the taxi stopped in front of Ethan's house, I froze. The entire facade glowed with Christmas lights, and through the large windows I could see many guests, more than I had expected. I paid the driver and carefully carried the pudding dish and gift bag to the door. I rang the bell, nervously smoothing the gray hair I had styled at the salon that morning. The door opened, and there was Ethan. His face, usually warm, looked tense. "Mom," he said, not hugging me as he usually did. "You're early." We said 6 p.m. "That's right," I replied, confused. Ethan glanced inside, then stepped out, closing the door halfway behind him. "Mom," something came up. "Vanessa's parents brought a few business guests, and the dinner table is already full." His voice faded. The ground felt like it was slipping beneath my feet. "Full?" I whispered. "These people are really important for my career, Mom. I meant to call you, but I got caught up with the preparations." He looked down at the dish in my hands. "You brought pudding?" "I can take it. Vanessa will love serving it to the guests." Inside, laughter and Christmas music filled the air. I tried to stay composed, though my eyes burned. "Ethan, I'm your mother." "I know, Mom," he said impatiently, "but you don't want to ruin this important night for me, right?" "We'll celebrate another day, I promise." Before I could reply, the door swung open and Vanessa appeared in a stunning red dress. "Oh, Mrs. Phyllis, what a surprise," she said with a sugary smile, then turned to Ethan, her expression tightening. "Honey, my parents are asking about that special wine." "Coming," he replied quickly, relieved for the interruption. Turning back to me, he said, "Mom, I'm really sorry, but tonight's not possible. Go home, I'll call you tomorrow." He took the pudding dish from my hands. Vanessa had already turned away. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, and before I could answer, the door closed. I stood there, staring at that cold, shut door as the December wind cut through my bones. Through the window, I saw Ethan hand the pudding to Vanessa, who placed it on the lavishly decorated table. Around her, well-dressed guests chatted cheerfully. In the center of the room stood a magnificent Christmas tree, far grander than any I could ever afford when he was young. I stepped back in shock as I heard someone inside ask loudly enough for me to hear, "Who was at the door, Ethan?" "No one important," my son replied while pouring wine into crystal glasses. I wasn't anyone important to him. The ride home was a blur. I don't remember calling another taxi, just walking aimlessly until I found one. The driver looked at me through the mirror, probably seeing my devastation. I only whispered my address and fell silent. "No one important." My son's words echoed in my head, each repetition like a knife to the heart. After 45 years, after every sacrifice, I was nothing. The taxi stopped in front of my old apartment building. I paid the fare and climbed the stairs slowly. The elevator had been broken for weeks. When I opened the door, darkness and silence greeted me like old friends. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dim glow from the street outside. My small Christmas tree stood in the corner with a few gifts beneath it for neighbors, for former colleagues, none for myself. I took the envelope out. $100,000, the result of decades of saving, skipped lunches, postponed trips, and dresses never bought, all so my son could fulfill a dream that apparently didn't include me. Something inside me shifted. The pain gave way to a clarity I'd never known. My whole life, I had put others first, especially Ethan. When my husband died and Ethan was only 8, I promised he would never go without. I worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, sacrificed my youth, all to be treated like something disposable on Christmas night. I walked to my desk, turned on the lamp, took out paper and pen. The words flowed on their own. "My dear Ethan, for 45 years, you've been the center of my world. Every decision, every sacrifice I made was for you. Tonight, I was going to give you a gift, the result of a lifetime of work and saving $100,000 to open your restaurant. But when you told me there was no room for me at your table, I realized no amount of money could buy the respect and love a son should naturally feel for his mother. No one important, you said. Maybe you're right. I may not be important to you, but I'm important enough to own the house you live in." Along with this letter is a formal eviction notice. That house is in my name, and always has been. I bought it thinking of your future, but now I see it was just another sacrifice for someone who doesn't value me. You have 30 days to vacate the property. Don't waste money on lawyers, all documents are in order. When you said there was no room for me at your Christmas table, I decided there would no longer be room for you in my house. The money I saved for you, along with the proceeds from the house sale, will now be used for something else to live my own life. I'm going to travel, see the places I always dreamed of, and do the things I postponed for decades while putting your needs before mine. Don't look for me. When I'm ready, I'll reach out. Merry Christmas from the mother you deemed unimportant for a seat at your table, but important enough to be the owner of the roof over your head. I read the letter over and over, tears streaming down my face. I folded it carefully, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in my purse. Before dawn, I would leave it at Ethan's door. I looked around my small apartment, full of memories but so empty of life. Nothing held me there anymore. My son had his own world, one without space for me. My parents were long gone. Friends had faded with time. I was utterly alone that Christmas night. But instead of despair, I felt relief. The weight of 45 years of sacrifice for others finally lifted off my shoulders. I went to my bedroom and took the old suitcase from the closet. The last time I'd used it was over 10 years ago on a school field trip. I placed it on the bed and packed a few essentials. The rest, I'd buy along the way. As I folded my clothes, an unexpected thought took form, something I could never have imagined just 24 hours earlier. Christmas night passed quietly. I didn't sleep, only planned what I would do next. The next morning, I woke early and dressed neatly, as if for a special occasion, and in a way, it was. It was the first day of the rest of my life. The ride to Ethan's house was silent. I clutched the envelope tightly. The elderly driver, who had driven me before, didn't ask questions. He simply drove. Perhaps he found it strange that a 70-year-old woman would go out the morning after Christmas just to deliver a letter, but he said nothing. The city was quiet, Christmas lights still hanging, but their glow faded. When the taxi stopped in front of the house that once belonged to me, I noticed 2 extra cars in the driveway, one belonging to Vanessa's parents, the other probably to one of their important guests. "I'll be right back. Please wait," I told the driver. I stepped out, holding the trembling envelope in my hand. Inside were the letter and the official eviction notice. The house where my son and daughter-in-law lived had always been in my name. What was once an investment for his future was now my instrument of freedom, and perhaps the hardest lesson he would ever learn. I hadn't slept all night. His cruel words still echoed in my head. "There's no room for you, Mom." The image of my pudding being carried inside as the door closed in my face replayed in my mind. "No one important," my son had said. Those words burned like red-hot iron. I walked slowly to the door, feeling the full weight of 70 years and every decision that had brought me here. I carefully slid the envelope under the welcome mat, leaving one corner visible. I rang the doorbell, then turned back toward the taxi. I didn't want to see Ethan's face or Vanessa's or the faces of those important guests who had taken my place. Back in the car, I asked the driver to wait a little longer. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, noticing my trembling hands. "I'm fine," I answered, though my voice shook. "I just want to make sure they pick up the letter." Minutes passed. I began to think maybe I should leave and let my lawyer handle the rest. But then the door opened. Ethan stepped out, still in his bathrobe, probably to get the newspaper. He bent down, saw the envelope, and picked it up with a puzzled look. Right there on the porch, he tore it open, pulled out the papers, and began to read. I watched the change in his face, as if in slow motion: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally rage. His usually calm expression twisted with fury. "What the hell is this?" he shouted loudly enough for me to hear through the taxi's closed window. "Is this some kind of joke?" Ethan stormed down the walkway, looking frantically around. His eyes found the taxi, and for a brief moment, our gazes met. "Mom!" he yelled, running toward the car, the crumpled papers in his hand. "Have you lost your mind?" The driver looked at me nervously. "Should I go now, ma'am?" he asked. "Drive," I said softly, though my heart pounded like a drum. The car began to move, but Ethan was almost upon us, banging on the window. "You can't do this. That house is mine. You promised." His voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "You, ungrateful old woman, after everything I've done for you," he screamed. A bitter smile touched my lips. Vanessa appeared at the door, still in her pajamas, followed by her elegantly dressed parents. They stood watching, shocked. "What's happening?" I heard Vanessa's shrill voice. "My mother's gone crazy," Ethan shouted, waving the papers. "She's evicting us. She's giving us 30 days to get out." The taxi sped up, leaving behind the image of my son in his expensive robe, yelling like a child denied his toy. The eviction notice fluttered in his hand like an upside-down white flag, not of surrender, but of war. As the car turned the corner, my phone vibrated. Ethan. I ignored it. It rang again, Vanessa. I switched it off completely. "To the airport, please," I told the driver, my voice surprisingly calm. "I have a flight to Lisbon in a few hours." As the taxi drove away from the wealthy neighborhood where my son had lived temporarily, as I discernment now knew I took from my purse the $100,000 check I had once planned to give him. I tore it in half, then into quarters, then eighths. It was over. The money I'd saved for decades would now be used to start my new life. As for the house, my lawyer would handle the sale once the eviction period ended. Ethan and Vanessa would have to find a place they could actually afford, one that, ironically, might not have room for all their important people. I looked out the window at the clear morning sky after Christmas. For the first time in years, I felt the sweetness of freedom, sweeter than any Christmas pudding I'd ever made. I pulled out my phone. My contact list had only 4 numbers: Ethan, my neighbor Martha, my old friend Helen, and the Chinese takeout place I sometimes ordered from. I turned the phone off and tucked it away. From that moment on, I would disappear from their world. At the airport, I walked to the first airline counter I saw. The young clerk smiled. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" "I'd like a ticket for the earliest flight available," I said. "Where to?" she asked. I hesitated for a moment. "Anywhere as long as it's away from here." She looked surprised, then smiled wider. "We have a flight to Lisbon in 2 hours, still a few seats left." "Lisbon," I repeated softly to myself. When I was younger, I dreamed of visiting Portugal, the land of my grandparents. It felt right to begin my new journey there. "Good, I'll take it." While she processed my booking, I looked around, families returning from vacation, couples holding hands, children laughing, and me, a 70-year-old woman about to embark on the greatest adventure of her life, completely alone. I should have been afraid, but instead, I felt peace. Maybe because, for the first time in my life, I was doing the right thing for myself. With my ticket in hand and my suitcase checked, I went through security and headed to the boarding gate. As I sat waiting, my thoughts drifted to Ethan. Had he read my letter by now? Was he trying to call me again? Part of me hoped he was hurting, that he might feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But another part, the part that would always be a mother, hoped my absence would make him think, and finally, grow up. The boarding announcement broke through my thoughts. I stood up, adjusted my coat, and boarded the flight that would take me away from everything familiar. Settling into the window seat, I took a deep breath and looked one last time at the airport of my city, the place where I had lived my whole life, where I raised my son, buried my husband, and taught generations of students. As the plane began to move down the runway, a single tear slid down my cheek. It wasn't sadness, but farewell, the closing of a chapter. When the plane finally took off, a strange calm washed over me. As the city grew smaller, beneath the wings, I thought about the $100,000 check. The money I once saved for my son would now be used for my own happiness, a happiness that came late, but it was still mine. Lisbon would be only the beginning. After that, maybe Paris, Rome, Athens, all the places I once dreamed of seeing but never dared to visit because I was too busy living for my son's dreams. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in many years, I smiled sincerely. The future was uncertain, but it belonged to me, and only me. Lisbon greeted me with a bright blue winter sky. As soon as I stepped out of the airport, the crisp air filled my lungs with a sense of renewal. I took a taxi to a small hotel I had booked during the flight, a cozy little place in the heart of the old Alfama district. The receptionist, a woman about my age, smiled warmly. "First time in Lisbon?" she asked. "First time leaving my country," I replied. She looked surprised, then her smile widened. "That makes it a very special occasion. I'll give you a room with a river view." When I entered the room and pulled back the curtains, I gasped. The Tagus River stretched out before me, sunlight sparkling across the water like millions of dancing diamonds. In the distance, the 25 de Abril Bridge reminded me of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, a place I had only seen in photographs. I sat down on the chair by the window, mesmerized, as if the whole city were whispering to me, "You came late, but you're finally here." That evening, I went out alone. Alfama's narrow, winding streets felt like a maze, charming and full of life. I found a small restaurant where a woman sang fado, her melancholic voice weaving through every breath of air. I ordered grilled cod and a glass of white wine, savoring it slowly in the warm, intimate atmosphere. For the first time since leaving home, I realized I hadn't thought about Ethan. The physical distance seemed to stretch the emotional one as well. It wasn't that I had forgotten him that would be impossible, but the pain had softened. In the days that followed, I explored every corner of Lisbon, visiting São Jorge Castle overlooking the city, strolling through elegant neighborhoods like Chiado and Príncipe Real, tasting the famous pastéis de Belém, crossing the river to see the Christ the King statue. Everywhere I went, I met kind people, tourists like me, or locals with whom I shared brief, pleasant conversations. I was no longer Ethan's mother. I was simply Phyllis, a woman discovering the world. 2 weeks later, I decided it was time to move on. The whole of Europe lay open before me, and I had the means to see it all. I chose Paris, the city of light, which had always fascinated me through the books I'd read. I booked a train ticket. I wanted to watch the scenery change slowly along the way, something a plane could never offer. The night before my departure, I turned on my phone for the first time since leaving America. The screen lit up with dozens of messages, voicemails, and emails, all from Ethan. My heart tightened. I thought of listening, maybe reading a few lines, but then the words, "no one important," and that Christmas door slamming shut flashed in my mind. I turned the phone off again. I wasn't ready, maybe I never would be. The next morning, I boarded the train to Paris with a heart lighter than ever before. Through the window, the world passed by like a movie. Green fields, small villages, distant mountains. With every mile, I felt myself moving farther from the person I once was and closer to the woman I was becoming. Paris exceeded every expectation. The Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, Notre Dame, still under restoration after the fire, and Montmartre, all looked as if they had stepped straight out of a dream. I stayed at a small hotel in Le Marais, a lively neighborhood where every street corner carried the breath of history. At a cafe near the hotel, I met Marie, a French widow about my age. She became my first true friend in this new chapter of my life. Marie showed me a side of Paris few tourists ever see: hidden bookshops, secret gardens, and the best spots to watch the sunset over the Seine. "It's never too late to start again," Marie told me one afternoon as we shared tea in her cozy apartment. "My husband died 5 years ago, and I thought my life was over. But then I realized I still had so much living left to do." Her words stayed with me. At 70, I too had much left ahead, and I was determined to live it fully. Time passed, and I continued my journey across Europe. After Paris came Rome, with its ancient ruins and magnificent churches. Then Florence, where Renaissance art took my breath away. Venice, with its winding canals. Barcelona, with Gaudi's fantastical architecture. Amsterdam, with its extraordinary museums. In each city, I built a small routine, finding a cafe for breakfast, chatting with the servers, discovering hidden corners away from the crowds. I no longer felt like a stranger. The whole world had become my home. In Vienna, about 6 months after leaving America, I finally found the courage to turn my phone back on. Sitting in an elegant cafe along the Ringstrasse, with a slice of fresh soccer cake before me, I powered it up. Hundreds of notifications appeared, messages and voicemails from Ethan, growing more desperate over time. Even an email from Vanessa, something I never expected. With trembling hands, I opened the first email. "Mom, where are you? Please call me. I'm so worried." I read the next ones, each more frantic than the last. A week later, "Mom, I've checked every hospital in the city. I went to your apartment, talked to your neighbors, no one knows where you went. Please just tell me you're okay." A month later, "Mom, I hired a private investigator. He found out you flew to Lisbon. I'm thinking of going there. I need to see you, to apologize. Please, answer me." The voicemails were even harder to hear. The first message, Ethan sounded angry. "Mom, what's this eviction nonsense? You can't do this. Call me back immediately." But in the later ones, his voice trembled, breaking between sobs. "Mom, please. The real estate agency has contacted us. Vanessa's panicking. Her parents are furious. They say I'm an idiot for not putting the house in my name. Please, talk to me." 2 weeks later came another. "The lawyers confirmed it. The house is completely yours. There's nothing I can do. We're looking for another place, but it's hard to find something decent with what I earn at the restaurant. Vanessa's threatening to move back with her parents. Mom, I'm begging you, please don't do this." The last one, only 3 days old, said, "Mom, I don't know if you're getting these messages. Maybe you changed your number. Maybe you're ignoring me. I wouldn't blame you. What I did on Christmas Eve was unforgivable. I always put others before you, my friends. Vanessa, her parents. I thought you'd always be there no matter how I treated you. What a terrible mistake. We had to leave the house. We're living in a much smaller apartment now. Vanessa can't stand it and has filed for divorce. Her parents barely speak to me. The restaurant isn't doing well. I think I'll have to sell it. Mom, if you hear this, I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm more sorry than words can ever express." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I listened to my son's voice. The waiter came over, concerned, offering me a napkin. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked in hesitant English. "Yes," I whispered, wiping my tears. "Just news from home." I sat there for a long time, letting his words sink in. Ethan seemed truly remorseful, changed by my absence and the consequences of his actions. A part of me felt a bitter satisfaction. My son was finally learning what it meant to lose something important, just as I had lost my place in his life that Christmas night. But another part of me, the mother within, ached at his pain. I hadn't wanted to destroy him, only to teach him. After much thought, I wrote a single email. "Ethan, I am safe. These past months, I have been traveling across Europe, visiting the places I always dreamed of. This journey has changed me. I heard your messages and understand you're going through difficult times. As for the house, my decision remains the same. It will be sold, and the money will be used for my future, the future I postponed for too long while prioritizing yours. I believe your remorse is real, and that matters. Sometimes we must lose something to understand its true value. You lost me the night you said there was no room for me at your table, that I wasn't important. I lost the son I thought I had raised, the gentle boy I cared for after your father's death. Maybe one day we can rebuild something new between us, not like before, but something balanced, built on mutual respect. I need more time for myself. When I'm ready, I'll reach out. I signed it, Phyllis. I sent the email and turned off my phone again. After paying my bill, I walked through the streets of Vienna, feeling both lighter and more thoughtful. In the weeks that followed, I continued north through Europe, visiting Prague, Berlin, Copenhagen, then Stockholm. In every place, I thought about Ethan, wondering how he was coping. Many times I almost called, but always stopped myself. It still wasn't time. Then, in a small coastal town in Norway, I saw the northern lights for the first time. Green and purple ribbons danced across the sky like ancient spirits, creating a scene of breathtaking beauty. In that moment, I realized that true forgiveness, deep and unconditional, isn't just a gift we give to others, but one we give to ourselves. I took my phone from my pocket, my hands trembling from the cold and emotion, and called Ethan. The phone rang several times before he answered. "Hello," he said cautiously, not recognizing the international number. "Ethan," I said, my voice breaking, "it's me." There was silence, then a shaky breath on the other end. "Mom, is it really you?" "Yes, son," I replied, my voice steadier now. "It's me." "Oh my God, where are you? Are you okay? Why didn't you call sooner?" His questions tumbled out in a rush. "I'm in Norway," I said softly. "I'm watching the northern lights, the most incredible sight I've ever seen." "Norway?" he repeated, astonished. "Mom, have you been traveling the whole world?" "Yes," I said gently. "I've been seeing the places I always dreamed of and discovering who I am, not just your mother." This time, the silence lasted longer. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice trembled. "I ruined everything, didn't I? That Christmas night, you came with the pudding you always made for me, and I sent you away." "Yes," I said plainly. "It was painful. Ethan, more painful than anything I've ever experienced. Mom, I'll never forgive myself. When I read your letter, when I got the eviction notice, it felt like waking from a nightmare, only to realize the reality was worse." I closed my eyes, letting the tears flow freely. Above me, the aurora lights continued their gentle dance. "What happened after I left?" I asked softly. "You said you had to move out, that Vanessa asked for a divorce?" Ethan sighed deeply. "The morning after Christmas, when I found your letter and the eviction notice, I panicked. Watching you leave in that taxi, I felt humiliated and terrified. I tried to call, but your phone was off. I went to your apartment, but the neighbor said you'd returned the keys and moved out." He paused, his uneven breathing audible through the line. A few weeks later, when he realized I had truly disappeared, my son had to face reality. He hired a lawyer, but it was useless. The house was entirely in my name. The agreement between us was nothing more than words. They had 30 days to move out. "And where did you go after that?" I asked gently. "We rented a small apartment on the other side of the city. Vanessa hated it from the very first day. She was used to comfort and space. In the end, she moved back in with her parents 2 months ago. I'm sorry," I said sincerely. I had never wanted my son to suffer, only to understand the value of love and respect. "Don't apologize," Ethan replied, his voice steady, surprising me. "It's the best thing that could have happened to me. I realized my marriage was empty, just like the way I treated you that Christmas night," he continued. "Vanessa was with me for status, money, and appearances. When the house was gone and life got navel signs, difficult, she let go instantly." "And the restaurant?" I asked, remembering his last message. "I sold it a month ago," he said. What surprised me most was the lack of sadness in his voice. "I realized it was never really my dream, Mom," he said. "I opened the restaurant to impress people, to look successful in the eyes of Vanessa's parents and all those so-called important friends." I smiled softly. "And what are you doing now?" "I went back to teaching cooking," he said, his tone carrying a smile. "Remember when I was a teenager, how much I loved teaching others how to cook? Now I have a small class, not fancy, but it's mine. My students are ordinary people who truly love food, not the kind who just want to take pictures for social media." A wave of pride rose in my chest. This was the Ethan I once knew, the boy I had raised with my own hands, honest and warm-hearted. "That's wonderful, son," I said warmly. We stayed silent for a moment, both thinking about how much our lives had changed. "Are you ever coming back?" he asked softly, his voice fragile, like a child's. I looked up at the night sky, where the northern lights still danced. "I don't know yet, Ethan. This journey means a lot to me. I'm discovering parts of myself I never knew existed." "I understand," he said, though I could hear the disappointment. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" The question was heavy, filled with both hope and fear. "Ethan," I said calmly, "I'm on the path to forgiveness. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or going back to how things were. It means choosing not to let past pain decide my future." "You have every right not to see me again," he said, his voice breaking. "It's not that," I answered gently. "I just need to finish this journey. I need to find out who Phyllis is beyond being Ethan's mother." "And who is she?" he asked quietly. I smiled, looking at the glowing sky. "She's brave, curious, loves art and music, isn't afraid to talk to strangers, and can find her way even in places where she doesn't speak the language. You've always been that way." "Mom," Ethan said softly, "I just never saw it." Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were tears of reconciliation, not bitterness. "About the money from selling the house," I continued, "I've made up my mind." "It's yours, Mom, you have every right," Ethan said. "I'm going to buy a small house in Portugal," I told him, "near the coast, not far from Lisbon, with a private garden where I can hear the ocean in the mornings." "That sounds perfect," he said, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. "If one day you want to visit," I added, "there will always be a room for you, a seat at my table." I heard him choke up on the phone. "I'd love that, Mom, more than anything. I'll come back to take care of a few things," I promised. "But this time I'll return on my own terms as the woman I'm becoming, not just your mother." "I can't wait to meet that woman," Ethan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We talked a little longer before saying goodbye, promising to stay in touch more often. When I hung up, I felt as if a circle had finally closed, even though there were still blank pages left to write. The money from the house sale, along with the savings I had put aside for Ethan all those years, would now be used for myself. I couldn't help but see the irony. The house I bought for my son's future had become the key to my own emotional and financial freedom. In the months that followed, Ethan and I stayed in regular contact. We exchanged weekly emails and sometimes video calls. He showed me his cooking classes and the dishes he taught his students. I told him about my journey, the people I met, and the places I visited. When I finally found the perfect house in Portugal, a small stone home facing the Atlantic, surrounded by ancient olive trees. I sent him pictures. His reply brought tears to my eyes. "That's the perfect place for you, a new beginning. I hope one day you'll invite me over. Maybe next Christmas. I promise this time there will be plenty of room at the table for you." I smiled. The next Christmas would be different. I would no longer sit alone in an empty house, nor be pushed away from my own son's celebration. It would be the first Christmas of my new life, the life I chose for myself. This time, I wouldn't just be someone's mother. I would be Phyllis whole, independent, and free. And if Ethan kept his word, if he truly came, there would be a place for him at my table, not because he was my son, but because he had become someone worthy of being welcomed back. Someone who had learned to value people for who they are, not for what they give. That lesson was painful for both of us, but like all the most valuable lessons in life, it was necessary. Sometimes we have to lose something to truly appreciate it, and sometimes we must step away from comfort to discover who we really are. That Christmas night, when I sat alone in that empty house, turned out to be the greatest gift I ever received, the gift of finding myself again, and of teaching my son the true meaning of family. And what about you? What do you think matters most in keeping a family strong? Love, forgiveness, or knowing when to let go? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I believe every story, every perspective, can bring warmth and hope to someone who needs it. And if you'd like to join me on this journey, one of lessons, emotions, and honesty, stay with me, and together we'll keep writing the stories yet to come.
I'd really appreciate your support. Please subscribe and leave a comment. May God bless you.